90s. That's over 30 years ago. Young people who are listening, does that affect your life now? 90s. That's over 30 years ago. Young people who are listening, does that affect your life now? 90s. That's over 30 years ago. Young people who are listening, does that affect your life now?
Morning, my people. Morning, my Jamaican people. Father Paul here again. Yeah, as you may have noticed, I've been doing this recent series of taking us back down memory lane. uh, Remind us where we're coming from. You know how far we've gone in this journey towards what some will say is a better Jamaica, and then there are those who will say, "Oh, nothing now go on," And for the nothing now go on people, I feel that it wouldn't really matter. These people would be like, you know, the proverbial people, children of Israel who were in the wilderness, and manna fall from heaven, and you know, quail just come in and just kind of lit them down, and thing. Yeah, there's not a lot you can do for people who have the opinion that nothing are going. Because you see, in order for you to consider that something is happening, you first have to have a mindset of seeking opportunity. Yes, you have to have that mindset of seeking opportunity. It is for the same reason why there are parents, family members who leave Jamaica and they go to other countries and they go through some hardships, make sacrifices for people, for family members, for their children. And at the end of the day, much of it comes to naught, because the persons for whom they were sacrificing either didn't understand the struggle, who felt that, just by being in a place, things happen positively. And so they don't count the effort. They don't realize what it is like. They don't know what it is when people have to get up in rain, snow, heat, heat like that Jamaica has never seen. Conditions under which they work, where they have to keep the eye on the prize. They can't afford to take the things that are being said to them too seriously, because if they do, they either don't go back or they hurt somebody. I mean, it's that simple. And for some of you in my hearing, you can relate. And for some of you, you don't know. You'll be like, yeah, it's hard everywhere. Yes, of course it's hard everywhere. Until you decide that it's not hard everywhere. See, for the guy who don't regard your effort, he will tell you, you don't know where I go through, man. You're not go through nothing. But for that next guy who really appreciate it, who when you send the $100 there, yeah, so you can buy a little light and a little water, so you can get a few things to rustle up a basic meal. that person understands. Sometimes that person doesn't understand until when you not upon nothing again and you can't send it. And if they're of the mindset to be grateful, to appreciate, they will look back and they will say, man, I tell you now, John, Tony, Bernadette, Auntie, Grandma, I tell you, I them you know. So then you might say to yourself, okay, so what all that have to do with anything? All of those things that you'll be thinking about, the gratitude, the appreciation, all of those things are history. So you must imagine my surprise and my shock when I listened to the second debate and I heard the lady from the PNP side say, young people don't care about what happened 30 years ago. And of all the things that were said, that one thing somehow stuck in my mind because that was probably the most dangerous statement of all the statements made. Because if you don't look into the history of things, you are likely to make the same mistakes. And let me give you a few examples. So if you realize that in your life that some of the worst things that happened to you were as a result of a particular behavior that you had. Like for instance, you lose your job because you lose your temper. And you lose one job because you lose your temper. And you lose two jobs because you lose your temper. If you don't remember that that historically, this is the thing that caused me to lose my temper. And I should avoid it. And I should really take control of the situation. Then you're likely to do it again and lose your job. A man who gets arrested because him can't keep him hands to himself and him decide to lay hands on another person, a woman, a child, and them have to take him wearing a silver bracelets, put him in the back of one police car. If that man don't pay attention to what are the things that trigger me to be so upset that I feel like I need to lay hands on someone and then face the consequences of that action. If you don't pay attention to the history, the times when it happened, and the times when you avoided it because you were paying attention to the history, you cannot say that history is not important. You cannot say that young people, or you can say it, but it wouldn't be true. It is the history. It is the history of the country going down a path of someone declaring, much to the shock and dismay of the business class, the people who run factories, that, democratic socialism is where you're going. And people are going off what they have heard in the news at the time. Not that they experienced it, but what they heard in the news of democratic socialism. This is what people heard. And when it was said, it put them in a panic mode. And then, to add insult to injury, you turn around and you say to them, there are 5 flights a day leaving. Pick one. So they pick one. And so you had a capital flight. If you don't have capital, you don't have investment. So these history matters. And for the person who was a member of one of those families that left Jamaica in the late 70s and who found themselves growing up in another country as a second-class citizen, history matters, because they may not have been the upper class per se. Their parents may just have been, working class folks who had a home, fortunate to have a car, and who were moving forward in what is supposed to happen. But then they leave because, boy, I hear that this socialism thing is not a good thing. And so therefore, you know what? I'm going to leave. I don't want my family to be subject to that. And then for different reasons, some returned in the 80s. But by 1989, PNP was back in power. No, it wasn't so scary at that point, because now we had a new and improved Michael Manley. A Michael Manley who was no longer spouting democratic socialism. A Michael Manley who didn't know that his time on this planet was going to be short. And that he would not have had enough time to right any of the wrongs that he may have started. And so we end up with the Fresh Prince. The Fresh Prince, whose moniker was Black Man Time Now. But what we didn't know with the Fresh Prince is that he was really all about himself and those close and loyal to him. And George Davis from Nationwide did an excellent piece highlighting the things that occurred under the watch of the Fresh Prince. Along with his sidekick, who some people in the PNP refer to as the best finance minister the country ever saw. I tell you, the record does not reflect that. The record doesn't reflect that. But I will lead them to that. If that's what they feel, because to convince a man against his will does not change his opinion. And they're entitled to their opinions, but not their own set of facts. For the people who lived through the 90s, who lived through the financial sector meltdown, FinSac, the high interest rate policies, yes, I'm sure that they will certainly beg to differ. But we also need to recognize that not now is part of history. And we really cannot afford to forget that history. Because if we don't, if we forget that history, we are bound, destined to repeat it. And you'll hear PNP say that they rescued Jamaica. And this is the question I often ask when I hear this conversation about rescue Jamaica. If the PNP rescued Jamaica, when did they do this? Because their 18-and-a-half-year run came to an end in 2007 when Bruce Golding won the election after returning from his stint with the NDM. Okay. So it was when they won in 2012 that they rescued Jamaica. So if they rescued Jamaica in 2012, why did the PNP lose the election in 2016? Because if you rescued Jamaica, then the people should have been overwhelmingly grateful. And they should not have put back in the JLP government that they were obviously running from into the rescuing arms of the PNP. Huh? If the PNP rescued Jamaica in 2012, how then did we end up back in the arms of the JLP in 2016? Okay. And then I guess there are those who will say that, well, it was because of COVID why the JLP won a second term in 2020. But many of the opinion polls will tell you that the people said, if they had a choice of leader, they would choose Andrew Holness and the JLP to manage when things are difficult. So if the JLP are able to manage when things are difficult, how much more will they be able to manage when things are better? Or is this at the point where, now that things are better, we switch back to the PNP? And so I will ask, historically, what has been your experience with the PNP? Show me when the PNP managed the country better, where we were always happy to run back to them, because historically we've all been running from them. PNP won the election in 1972 because they had not been the government before under independence, so they got a chance. They got a chance because their argument was that they were going to be looking out for the little man. And I will give them that. But you have to keep in mind that in order to look out for someone, you must first be able to have that foundation, the means by which to look out. Which is why, for those who have taken an aircraft, a plane, when they give the safety briefing, the instructions before they depart, and they tell you that when the mask falls from the little roof, you are to put on your mask first before you try to help the next person. Why? What does that mean? Well, the reason why the mask falls, it is because there is a problem with the airflow, the oxygen that you need to breathe and live in the aircraft. And in a panic situation, people are quickly using up the oxygen. So what they're telling you is put on your mask first so that you can have a steady supply of oxygen to keep you alive, and then you assist the person next to you who needs assistance. What we have seen in the last 9 years of the GLP government is a government that has put on the mask first, which is build up the foundation, the economics of the country. And in the middle of doing that, a pandemic occurs and therefore sets them back. But because they've been doing a pretty good job of it, the pandemic does not wipe them out and the rest of Jamaica. No. They manage, keep us afloat. We get through the pandemic. Things are still strong and we're moving forward. Yes. And while doing this, they're paying attention to the history of not doing things that the PNP have done. For instance, run with it under Omar Davis, knowing full well that you don't have the money to do some of the things that you're doing, but you say, run with it. We will fix it afterwards. You know, that's like you getting paid and decide to stop at a OTB, off-track betting, to buy this horse that somebody tell you that they get a tip on. But the money you're going to use to do it is the rent money that is due tomorrow. And so you buy this horse. and the horse come dead last and you lose your money and you don't have the rent money. And now you're in a world of hurt. So the JLP obviously learned from it and decided not to do no run with it. So history matters. And this lady who said that history, that young people don't care about what happened 30 years ago, that young person's life may have been better if some of the things that happened 30 years ago didn't happen. Now, don't get me wrong. There are those people who happen to be well connected, that no matter what is going down, they're okay. Maybe this lady was one of those persons. One of those persons for whom FinSAC did not have any problem for her or her family. And so for her, it was okay. But for those people who were affected by FinSAC, whose family lost everything, whose family ended up with in some kind of tragedy, not necessarily the extreme, but just a whole changing of life. Children who would have had a future working in the family business. And the family business could have been something simple, a hardware store, a hairdresser, a supermarket. That might have been the family business, a little construction company. That might have been the family business. Now those same people, those children, have to find themselves going out to a 9 to 5, working for other people. So don't say history doesn't matter. The history matters. The history is very important. So as we are on the cusp of the general elections for 2025, we need to look at our history. And, I find it interesting. When you do these postings on a YouTube channel, the channel provides a lot of information, what they call Google Analytics. It shows you how many people watch the video. It shows you how long they watch the video for. It shows you the age group of the people. Again, going off the information that people put in when they have access to these platforms. Not all of it is 100%, but for the most part, it gives you a general idea. And many times, I suspect that people look at the heading and maybe it's painful. Who wants to go back there? But sometimes it's important to go back there, to look into the past, to see where things went wrong. And know when faced with a decision that could affect the future or that will most definitely affect the future, we should really pay attention. History matters, people. History matters. Don't be scared of the past. Learn from it. That's what's on my mind.